Good morning, friends. Today, it's a very, not sure what to say about today. It was sunny earlier, and then this big, like, thunder cloud just rolling in, so I'm not really sure what's going to happen today. It'll probably rain again. I was looking forward to it being sunny for once today after, we had like a streak of pretty gloomy days. But I guess not today. So today, it's Friday, as you all know. I figured today, since I have my tradition every Friday now to do a book review, I would review the Bible. This is a Bible I found actually in my old apartment. It was from the previous tenants, and at one point I decided to read it because I've never read the Bible. I don't know anything about where our religion comes from, and subsequently most of our culture and legal system, or moral ethics, all of it derives from monotheism, Judaism, Christianity, and if you want to go far, Islam, but Islam is not really a part of Western culture, so to speak. It's more of a Middle Eastern cultural phenomenon. I will say it's definitely interesting to read. There's a lot of filler, I would say. I think this book could pretty much be cut down to about a fifth of its size. I think a lot of it has pretty arbitrary information in terms of trying to convey the messages put forward. I think if you want to have a Bible that's supposed to be a guideline for people, it should be something that's sort of short and sweet and sort of gets to the point, and there's not much else going on there. But I do appreciate the stories that are in here. Whether they are real or not is irrelevant. They are interesting stories. I will say my favorites are definitely the story of King David, the story of Jacob, definitely very interesting. His life was interesting when he wrestled with the angel of death, so to speak. And then there's the story of Job, who has God basically destroy his entire life, and he has to basically, it's a very Socratic type of dialogue that he's having with these three other, I assume, rabbis, or I don't really remember. They're like educated people trying to convince him of what the message God is trying to tell him, and he has basically no sort of agreements with them, understanding that his life is basically just utter chaos, and there's nothing really to explain it other than to say that it's absolute torture, which is sort of the introduction to Satan in the Bible. I'm also now rereading the Torah currently in this big ass book, the Humash, I think it's called, the Stone Edition. The reason I'm rereading it is because this version has a lot of commentary. A lot of commentaries in here that sort of brings it more into a holistic view of reading the Torah, which I think is very interesting, and it sort of helps you sort of get a grasp on what's actually happening. It's hard to actually pay attention when reading just the normal King James version, because it's written in an English that's very dated and very just not very appealing or understandable. This one still has that sort of old English type of thing going, but it still has more of a modern flair. It's easier to understand, I would say. And then there's a commentary, which definitely like opens it all up, so where you can like fully understand it clearly. You understand the intentions, where it's going. Obviously, the commentary is not to be taken literally. It's just commentary from people who have studied it a lot more than I have, for sure. This was actually a gift I got from my bar mitzvah, and I never actually had the time to read it, so now I'm taking the time now, 10 years later. So anyway, I'm definitely enjoying that. I'm definitely enjoying, right now I'm at the part with Jacob. I never actually really remembered it the first time I read the Bible. It was kind of just like it's when you're reading a book and then you're sort of forgetting what you're reading. You're just sort of reading the lines, but you're not actually digesting any of the information. That's kind of what I felt like when I was reading most of the Bible, because a lot of it's very dryly written. Like I said, it was written in a time when people didn't really care much about making the story interesting or having typical writing conventions to make it appealing, I guess. I will say I also read the New Testament, which is at the end. I think most people don't realize that. Hold on, I'm gonna just take it out. The New Testament is only like the last sort of third of the Bible, not even a quarter of the Bible. The last quarter, it's really not that big at all. It's pretty small compared to the rest of the Bible, which obviously, if you've read the Bible and you're familiar with it, it's pretty easy to understand. But to me, it was kind of shocking to see how small the New Testament was compared to the Old Testament. And from the first time I read the Old Testament, it was sort of a rekindling with my culture and rekindling with my religion, and that was when I sort of had more of a spiritual attunement, I guess you would call it. Not necessarily believing everything that was in the Bible, but sort of being more in touch with it and being more understanding of it, and sort of contemplating the concept of God. Although I will say that it's definitely opened my mind up, and I definitely do believe in God in some form or another. And I don't want to emphasize it really, because people have their own views as to what it is, and I don't believe in making absolute statements about that kind of thing. But I will say, when I read the New Testament, I was thinking, okay, maybe this will release something in me, and maybe I'll see sort of Jesus in a new light and understand Jesus. And honestly, reading the New Testament, I wasn't really that impressed. It was okay, and I feel like most of what's happened in the New Testament, it's like, okay, you have Jesus who says some good stuff, but it's nothing really that different from anyone else, any of the other prophets who basically said the same things. Jesus is just reiterating what has already been said, and he does it pretty well, although he gets killed in the end. And I always mix the two up. St. Peter or St. Paul, whatever the one who after his death goes and starts preaching Jesus, and he basically ruined the entire world, so to speak, in a major way, especially in Europe. Whoever that was. Hold on, I'm just gonna check because I need to know. Okay, I guess it's Peter. I'm pretty sure it's Peter. If not, it's Paul. Whatever. Peter goes out there and starts criticizing the rabbis, creating this huge divide amongst something that was monotheistic. And now it's like, all right, you got to believe me that there is this guy named Jesus and he's the Son of God. And some people believed them, and some people were like, what the fuck, what are you doing here? Like, I mean, I understand that Jesus probably had a message to say, and it was important to say, but I think his ego got in the way of him to where he believed he was God. Whether or not these fables of him walking on water and whatnot are true is hard to say. There's no mention of Matthew, Mark, or Luke anywhere in the Bible, although they are the apostles apparently, but they're nowhere to be seen in terms of the actual accounts. They're just sort of like, oh, these are the books that they wrote, but it doesn't seem like they actually wrote them because they weren't even there, which I think is a major problem here. I think Peter was the one who wrote most of it, or at least John or Peter, came together and created more witness accounts of them to make it more marketable to people to understand, to believe that Jesus was the Son of God. and this isn't discounting what Jesus did. I just think it was kind of a weird marketing trick that Peter did to sort of turn Jesus into the superstar. And then there's the flaw that Jesus was supposed to rise from the dead, and I mean he did supposedly for like 10 minutes and then left, and it was like, okay, that's not really useful. The whole point of rising from the dead is sort of like you're gonna stay around and do something, but Jesus just kind of rose from the dead and then left immediately after. So to me that's sort of a major plot hole. That and also he says completely two different things. In the first two apostles, like the witness accounts, he says something right before he dies, and then he says something completely different in John's account, which I find very strange. Why would they change something like that? And that sort of shows that there's an issue here. There's a deep rooted issue with the New Testament that's very flawed in terms of its creation, which I think people should realize. I don't believe in worshiping a man who claims to be God. I don't believe in doing that now. I don't believe that it'll ever happen, because if God is to come in the physical form, he would just be a human being like anyone else, because that's what happens when you become a human being. You become distorted from the metaphysical plane, or whatever you want to call it. Arguably, every human being is the consciousness of God being expressed through a human emotion. So pretty much everyone is sort of God in that sense. So Jesus is a good guy, but I don't believe in the New Testament that much. I think there's a lot of problems with it. Revelations is kind of just wacko, to put it plainly. I'm not a big fan of it. But the Bible in general, I'll definitely just read it. And, if you've never read it, definitely read it, just because, I feel like it's important to know where most of our culture stems from. And, that should be it. So anyway, hope you have a wonderful day.